Hey, hey, welcome back to The Good, the Bad, and the Techy, a podcast all about leading edge technology. I'm VP of Engagement at GigArm, John Collins.
And I'm CTO Howard Holton.
So, this week, we're going to try and cut through the jargon and talk through what you need to make sense of tech conferences, because we've both been to a few in our lifetimes, and it's a jungle out there. So let's do it. Howard, tell me about the last conference you went to.
The last conference I went to was Splunks.conf, which is still my favorite name for a conference.
.conf.
.conf, right? It's a great way to kind of shorten conference, and the reference to .configuration files I think is awesome.
And that big tent event, where was that one?
Yeah, this was at the Venetian in Las Vegas. I think they had 5,000-ish attendees. So
Right. So
big.
yeah, a big thing.
Yeah. And I went as an analyst, right? So I was on the analyst track rather than some I just go on the attendee track. Some I go on the speaker track.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go to a lot on the vendor track. So kind of all the available tracks, I've done many, many conferences, on those tracks. And they're very different.
I have to say, the Venetian, I've grown to like it, like someone who you just can't get rid of, and eventually you just get, because there's so many conferences there, that eventually you start to actually know yourself way around the canal system, which is the scariest thing. But you know where the little shop is where you can actually buy
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah. And all the good restaurants are.
exactly. So a conference. What we're talking about here. I mean, there's a lot of vendor events. They have generally a whole bunch of learning tracks. They'll have the big expo area. For analysts that impress, there could be a program of press conferences and exec briefings and so on and so forth. And what we wanted to talk about on this was, I think we were both really sharing experiences of these things, and we'd been to conferences where literally you left and thought, it was great, but I just couldn't write down in an email what I got out of it.
Sure.
And how to solve for that. And what I thought we could do is break it down into the kind of the before, the during, and the after, in terms of lessons to take away. So starting with before, I think sure you can prep, you can kind of see all the people that are going to be there. You can look at the expo, you can look at the program, you can look at this, you can look at that. But what would you say kind of prepares you for actually going to the conference? So you're sitting on the plane, or you're sitting in the car on the way to the thing, and you're thinking, "Yep, I've got what I need here."
So I think there are three things that I find to be the most valuable when I'm going to see a conference. And remind me, I have a really funny story about the Splunk event. Maybe we'll save it for the
Yeah,
speaker.
funny story. Yeah, that's a
Um,
hook.
well, all right. So I'll just do the funny story. So they have these analyst dinners, right? Every convention does when you go as an analyst. Every conference does. And so I roll up to this restaurant, which I walked the wrong way. Speaking of the canal system, I walked the wrong way. So I had to walk the entirety of the canal system to get to the restaurant. It's a very nice Asian restaurant. I don't remember the name of it, but they advertise it like crazy. It's the one they advertise like crazy throughout the hotel. It's very good. And so I roll up and I'm like, hey, I'm here for the Splunk event. And they're like, oh, yeah. Media? And I went, yeah, sure. And so we roll in, right? They sit me in a room. They just guide me to the back. It's this big room, and they sit me down, and I introduce myself. I don't know anybody at the table. And they get the whole room, right? So there's like 9 tables. And I didn't really recognize anybody, but I'm still kind of a new analyst, so I don't really recognize anybody yet. And so I'm sitting back there, and we're talking, and I'm enjoying myself, and tables laughing, and we're having a good time, and the drinks finally get served. Um, and finally, someone I recognize comes in the room and starts talking, and ha ha ha, and hey, Howard, you're here? Yeah, I made it because I was late. Sweet. She talks for a few minutes to a few other people, and then she comes over and she goes, okay, are you going to come with me? And I'm like, why? And she goes, you're in the wrong room. And I went, wait a minute, what? And she goes, yeah, you're in the media room. We have a separate space for analysts. Would you like to come over to the analysts? And I went, well, I mean, I'm kind of enjoying the people here. They seem to be enjoying me. Do I have to? And she goes, well, and they're like, no, you don't have to go anywhere. Right, the people at my table, and I'm like, I'll go with you. It's fine. And so we go out and we walk around, and she's like, hey, I found Howard. And then I recognized like 9 people.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, I raise you that once I was at a Hewlett Packard event, and there is a journalist called John Collins, as well as an analyst called John Collins, which is me. And so I said who I was, and they sent me to a hotel, and I checked in under my name. But actually, and this is a really interesting phenomenon in this industry for those who don't know. That there are press and there are analysts. The press are treated in a different way. The press tend to be fed with alcohol and told things, and then they try and file stories as quickly as possible, as much as their addled brains can do first thing in the morning after having stayed up all night. So being in the wrong hotel meant that I was there with the journalists in a hotel with a free bar, and I did not make the keynote the next day. Let's just put it that way. It got a bit messy. So yeah, you got to be careful. But I think with a name like Howard Holton, if there's a journalist called Howard Holton, then
yeah,
I would be most surprised.
I haven't found it. There's a very good American football player in the Midwest called Howard Holton. It would be very difficult to confuse the two of us.
He hasn't got a beard.
He does not have a beard. Not in any of the pictures I've seen.
Okay, fair enough. So three things. I'm sure there are 1,000 other reasons why you wouldn't get confused.
So there are 3 things I do to prepare for conferences. The first is by far the most important, and that is I figure out the logistics long before I go. Right. So how am I flying? When am I going to land in? Kind of compared to when is check-in. This is a mistake that's very easy to make, right? If you don't have status at a hotel and you try to check in 5 hours before check-in, they're going to hold your bags and tell you to go find someplace to hang out, and they'll text you when you can check in. And they probably won't text you. You probably have to check back, right? So first, try to manage your logistics so that it lines up with check-in, and then same with check-out, right? If you've got a 5 o'clock flight and check-out's at 11 in the morning, what is your plan from 11 to 5, assuming you don't get a late checkout that allows for that, right? You'd probably be better off with a 2 p.m. flight, checking out at 11 o'clock, going to the airport and getting on, rather than a 5 p.m. flight, right? You're probably, managing luggage for that extra few hours is not going to be overly joyful.
This is really interesting because I do none of these things, which some of the time works out just fine. But it does remind me of the time I turned up at an airport, because sometimes being analyst or press, there may be transport arranged for you, so I turned up at the airport being told there would, but the PR person had been very ill, and so it hadn't been done, and I had to go to Intel's shop of the future. So in my broken German, I said I need to go to the shop of the future. I ended up at the biggest hypermarket in town, sitting in the manager's office, like a little lost schoolboy, as he called up the actual shop of the future, and then they organized some transport for me. So sometimes, it does backfire, but it's a great lesson because it's actually nothing to do with the tech. It's nothing to do with the content of the conference. It's get the stuff out of the way so that you can focus on the meat, if you like.
Okay, so that's one. So the second is prearrange all your meetings as conceivably as possible, and for me that includes meals, right? I want to know before I go, who am I meeting, where specifically. Like the meeting invite has to include the booth number or the suite number or wherever we're meeting, with very specific directions. And then give yourself a buffer to make it in between those things, right? Let's say you have from 12 to 1:30 because there's no content you want to watch, and so you have that time to do meetings. If you've tried to do 3 30-minute meetings, you're going to be late to every single one of them. right? You're more likely to be able to do 3 15-minute meetings to give yourself a large buffer in between them. Additionally, remember, you have to eat and hydrate, right? I don't know about you, but I don't generally do 15,000 steps at my home office. I do 15,000 steps a day at a conference. You need to have a little bit, you need to maintain your energy, right? You need to do a little bit more caloric intake. Also, they're long days. So again, plan accordingly, right? Carry snacks, right?
It's very easy to kind of suddenly find yourself at the end of a 5-hour stint having dashed from one meeting to another and be completely hungry. And the only thing inside you is the fact that you've got a full bladder, and it's just. I guess it's the Christmas shopping principle, right? It's kind of you can go Christmas shopping just by heading into town and then starting to work out what Auntie Maud's going to like when you're walking through the shops, hoping for inspiration, and it'll take you 3 hours. Or you can sit down in a comfy chair with a cup of coffee and spend a boring 40 minutes working through everybody and going, well, she wants jam, they want this, paper plane for that person, whatever, and just go out and buy those things.
Yes. On that note, when it comes to picking content, so most conferences will give you the ability to watch the recording afterwards. So I no longer stress about watching content. There are 2 exceptions. There are two content bits that I watch. I always try to make the keynote. The keynote sets up the tone of the conference every day, and anything else that you watch, especially if it's first party content, right, put on by the conference owner, their content's going to reflect what was already revealed in the keynote. So it's important to see the keynote. If you've watched nothing else, watch the keynote. Watching that live, I think, is really important. And then the second thing I do is I don't look for topics anymore. I used to look for topics. Ooh, this topic sounds interesting. Ooh, this topic sounds interesting. I'd go sit in those. No. I look for speakers. Do I know the speaker? If I know the speaker and the speaker's engaging and I like the speaker, then the topic is likely to be better than whatever the synopsis actually is. And so I'll go for the speaker. If, however, there's a topic I'm like, I really want to know what this topic is, and I don't know the speaker, I'll YouTube the speaker and try to find them and watch something they've done to make sure that they're an engaging speaker. There is nothing worse than having an hour of your life ruined at a conference because you can't get it back. There's 8 different tracks on a speaker that can't keep you engaged. Right? You're not going to learn. You're not going to gain what you wanted. Right? You're mostly going to spend the time on your phone.
It does go back to that 5-hour thing of, if one of those hours is the most boring hour of your life, that's a hardship. It does just caveat on the keynote, which I completely agree with, but it's not a caveat so much as one of my best keynote watchings ever was at a GitHub conference in San Francisco, and for some reason I chose not to get up at 7 a.m. so I could get a good seat because the conference center was on the other side of town by the river. And instead I walked because it was all streamed. So I walked to the conference center, watching the keynote on my phone and listening and having an occasional look because didn't need to see that much of it. When there's a slide, okay, I got it, carry on walking. And I was far more engaged. I got to the conference refreshed. I'd seen some beautiful sights in parallel, and rather than sitting in a very uncomfortable seat for 2 hours.
I have many times watched the keynote on streaming while sitting in a cafe having breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Watch the keynote live, which means when it is, currently happening. It doesn't mean you have to watch it live and in person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I will totally agree with you. The advantage to doing it at a cafe is, first, you get a much better breakfast than whatever the breakfast was you were likely going to get otherwise. And cafe could just mean, the breakfast buffet at the restaurant, or at the hotel, right? If that's what you get. But it also gives you a place to put your laptop and you can take notes. Right. And again, right, the keynote is the one time where I think note taking is valuable. Like, grab the 5 themes from the keynote. What are the big themes in the keynote, and what do those big themes mean to, within the context of the keynote? Because one of the other things that I found to be really useful is when I'm in a meeting with someone, I'll ask them what that means to them. right? Hey, these are the things that were talked about during the keynote. I'm curious how you guys see this. I'm curious if you guys agree, if you disagree, or if you're ignorant of it, right? If it's new and you don't have an opinion. Right, they're at the conference. That should have some value. So so I think spending the time to prepare, right, makes you will make the conference that much more successful.
It's another big advantage of watching in a cafe is when you leave, you just walk out the door. Whereas when you leave a keynote in a big tent event, you're leaving with 5,000 other people all heading for the same bathroom.
Well, and the other thing you can do is you can strategically pick. These convention centers are huge, right? And oftentimes, especially like Marconi in San Francisco,
Moscone.
Moscone is 4 different buildings. It's not just the one, right? And so what you can do is you can actually pick a place to watch to stream the keynote that is close to the next session you want to get into. And so you when the keynote's done, close your laptop, put it away, stand up and walk out, and you will be that much closer to everyone else fleeing the keynote to get to the same popular sessions.
Very true.
So. All right, so then number 3 is kit. How much walking am I going to do? Making sure I chose the right shoes. Look, the fact of the matter is no one's looking at your shoes at a conference. I don't care if your conference attire is a suit with a blazer. First off, don't do that. And second, if that is the attire, you work for IBM in 1985, throw on some comfortable kicks, right? If they have to look like wingtips, go to Johnson & Murphy and spend $150 on wingtips that have their X4 sole in it, that have a nice, breathable, comfortable walking sole. So they still look professional, and yet you're not killing your feet because you're going to do 15,000 steps, right? Think about what you're wearing, and especially, dear God, think about the environment that you're going to be in. If you're in Vegas in the summer, where a lot of these conventions take place or conferences take place, and you're not staying at the hotel that's physically attached to the convention center, and you have to walk outside. It was 111 degrees all week 2 weeks ago in Vegas. Did not leave the hotel even once. Not once. And normally I leave when I'm in Vegas, I like to get as far away from the strip as possible. So I'll leave the hotel. I didn't leave the hotel once. It was 111. Even inside the hotel, it was a little warmer than it generally is. Think about what you're going to wear, and then think about what you're going to carry with you. If you're one of those people that always drags a laptop, maybe think twice about that. Right? If you like the swag, don't carry around the bag. Bring an empty backpack. Right? And pro tip, if you wait until the last day of the convention, an hour and a half before the expo floor closes, they will fill a bag for you, because otherwise they have to carry it home themselves.
That's very true. If you want to replenish your sock drawer, go on the last day.
Yep. And then the other thing that I would tell you is figure out how the badge works. Is it a QR code? Is it an RFID tag? A little piece of blue tape over your QR code means that they're not randomly scanning you, and you can be a little bit choosy. It is very easy to take the little plastic sleeve and slide your badge up so the QR code is revealed, so you only get scanned by those people that you actually want to have a conversation with. And what I do is anytime I get scanned, first I make sure I want to talk to them, and then I tell them specifically what I want to talk to. They have a note section. The note section gets used. It also means if I use language that I recognize, I can filter very, very quickly. Hey, we saw you at the conference, and we'd like to talk to you. Cool. There's no note in there. I'm just deleting it.
That is frustrating. I go to stands and I'd start chatting to someone, and they say, "Oh, can I scan your badge?" And I kind of half do, because I know that they get measured on it. It's like,
sure,
it's such a blunt instrument. How many badges did we scan?
Yep.
And I think, they've done me a favor with stopping chat. But then I'll get some poor salesperson that calls me up and says, "What kinds of challenges are you facing?" And I'm like, well, mainly just speaking to you, having realized that this is going to be a waste of your time. And this is 1 out of the 20 calls that you could have done this hour. And therefore you're already running at 5% less efficiency than you could have been. I'm so sorry. And I could have saved that time by being a bit clearer when the badge was being scanned, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm pretty clear now, right? Yes, you can scan my badge, but you probably need to note I'm never going to buy.
Mm.
Right? I am not currently a buyer. Until my company changes, I'm not a buyer here. Whatever works. And if they call you anyways, I just don't answer the phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do feel, sometimes you get it. It sounds like a younger person, but it doesn't have to be. But it's someone that says, "That's interesting that you're not going to buy from us." So, and then they'll still try and use the script.
Yep.
It's like, mate, I'm really, really sorry, but you're now. This is your time you're taking,
Yeah,
not
no
mine.
means nobody. No means no.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the three things before.
Before, those are the three things before. Now,
And we were getting into during, to be fair,
yep.
in terms of the keynotes and so on and so forth. And now we were going towards actually meeting people and kind of. So how do you prepare for the after? I
Okay.
guess.
So the other thing I do before, I probably should have said this, is I socialize that I'm going to the conference. I
Mm-hmm.
don't socialize so I can meet more salespeople. I socialize so that other people that are going to the conference know that I'm going to the conference and we can meet. Right? Friends that I haven't talked to in 6 months or a year, or in one case, 5 years at RSA. Right? They know you're there, and I'll just get random text messages. If you have my cell phone number and text me, it generally means I know you. Right? So I get text messages. Hey, dude, I know you're here. I'm over here. If you got time to meet. Right?
That
Um,
does remind me of a little funny story, if I may, which was there's actually a hashtag cloud beers is a thing, which is people that meet up sporadically at conferences. Tim Crawford, our ex research director of Olgeom, is on there, and various other people. I was at a stand. I was chatting to a guy. I can't remember the company. It might have been VMware, but it might not. He was called Dave. I said, "I'm really sorry. I have to, by coincidence, I have to go and meet this other Dave, and so I'm going to have to go now." I then walked at least 20 minutes to the meeting point to meet the same Dave,
meet the same day.
which was quite remarkable, given the many thousands of people that were at the conference. But cloud beers is one thing. Yeah, so it's very worth. I think there's lots of lonely people at conferences that just want to chinwag, and they're sometimes the best relationships I take away from those conferences.
Agreed. One other thing that I've learned to do, whether you take me up on this or not, it has been a huge differentiator. So I started doing this at Comic Cons. I go to a lot of Comic Cons, and I have friends that have booths, and that's how we became friends. Was I just got to know them through the art that they created, and we've become friends. And one of the best parts about it is my friends will let me store my bag at their booth.
Ah,
And at Comic Con, I'm buying comics, I'm buying books, I'm having things signed. Like the amount of it's not swag. I'm going out of my way to procure these things, and books are not liked, and paintings are not liked, right? And the stuff just
that's a
light.
total pro tip.
And yes, and so if you have a vendor that you have a good relationship with, that's like, these guys take care of me, these guys are my bros, reach out to them, reach out to the sales guy and go, hey, first off, it's a great way to get a pass. Right? Your top 5 vendors, you should have already reached. You should not be paying for conference tickets. You should be reaching out and going, hey, I know you guys get some passes. Can I get a pass? It never hurts to ask, accept a no, right? You don't have to apply pressure. But the number of times that I've gotten passes where I just have to pay for travel, that's a significant reduction for my company in cost. I don't. It's extremely rare. I can only think of one conference that I actually pay for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Every other conference I get comped in some way. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is go to the booth and go, hey, I'm a customer. This is who I deal with. Like, chat them up for a minute and then go, would it be a problem if I just drop my bag here? I know you guys have bags, have all your bags strapped here. Would it be all right? I can tell you it's extremely rare that I get a no. And being able to have a place to drop your bag and not walk around with that weight on your shoulders throughout the conference is huge.
I'm kind of reminded of it was an American president, and it could have been George Washington, who said the best way to get someone to like you is to ask them a favor.
Uh, yeah,
Which
we could have
is
a
another.
whole conference, or we could have a whole podcast on the value of the favor. It's the best sales tool in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also interestingly, I went to the London Book Fair a few years ago, which is not a conference I would normally be invited to. In these ages of bloggers and so on and so forth, and most people have got have written a blog or whatever, I just had to, in order to get a media pass, I just had to say yes, I would write about them. And I think on one occasion at another conference, I wrote something first and said, "This is the sort of thing I'm writing. Can I get a media pass?" And they gave me a media pass. So often for conferences that you would have to pay for, there are some conferences that are oversubscribed by journalists, so that's not going to work. But often you can get a media pass just by showing that you will write about them, because ultimately they care about the words, not about where they came from.
For sure. And I have to say, the conferences I really want to go to tend to be the smaller ones that are open to that.
Mm.
Right. I will happily write about you. This is what my audience looks like. Fantastic. I will happily write about you. This is the address, and you're welcome to snag anything and use it as a quote if you'd like. Awesome. Right.
So,
and as an engineer at heart, still, the conferences I want to go to, the more engineering focused conferences, they're more than happy to have that. Right? They got 1,000, 1,200, 2,500 attendees. They're small conferences, and so they're more than happy to do that.
And a lot of great content at those conferences that you won't get at the Big Bang ones, or you'd struggle to find it because it's noise and signal. So you're at the conference. You've met the right people now because you've already planned for that. Where to go from there?
So the first thing I try to do at the conference, and by first thing I just mean not instead of the keynote, but kind of my first kind of opportunity, my first open window. I walk the expo floor. Right? How's it laid out? Where are people located? Who is there that maybe it wasn't on my list? Who do I want to make sure I touch with? Kind of that sort of thing. And just kind of make a lap. And the thing I'm specifically looking for is
Socks.
No, I don't do the only thing I will take home is a book, and I will take home your book if the author signs it. I tend to read them on the airplane, and then I'm done with them. And I like paper for tech books because I make notes. But no, what I look for is the emerging tech area. Right, which are generally these little stand-ups with like just black background, white words, or white words, black background. Because those are the things that I'm going to find to be the most interesting. And because I wasn't aware of them, I wouldn't have set up meetings. Right, the ability to be a differentiator to them and them to be a differentiator to you is higher than any other booth. And the fact is, if you're not a company whose IBM deal is going to make a splash for IBM. Right, or a splash for HP, or a splash for Dell, or pick the vendor, right? CrowdStrike, right? You will make a splash for one of those booths, right? They're looking for customer revenue, and you'll be a big fish. You will get incredibly nice treatment from them by being a customer. If they're any good, right, then you actually mitigate your risk quite a bit because they're likely to be grabbed by someone. They're likely to be acquired. They're not likely to fade out and die. And being a long-term customer has a lot of sway with those organizations. So I always make a point to go by, swing by, and kind of do a walkthrough.
I'd add to that the walk through those stands. I mean, I can remember at KubeCon this year, for example. Often there are patterns of the new companies that I hadn't thought about. So there were a lot of development tools for Kubernetes that had become a thing. So it's here's the libraries, here's how to check the origins of the libraries, and so on and so forth, that were starting to emerge as a concrete element of the platform. And it was at that very section. By walking around there, that I thought, those things, we're now getting development platforms here, which was really useful. Background information to me. I wouldn't have got that by browsing Google or any search engine of choice.
It really shows where investment dollars are going and where innovation is coming from, right? And so being able to see kind of what they're doing, how they're thinking about these things, you tend to get a little bit more of a fresh view, which is also incredibly useful.
Yeah, and I think you've just reminded me of something that I would love to be always better at. Is every one of the conversations I have often is interesting enough to stop and write it down, as notes for even if I just took 5 minutes, and I can do that. I do it often, but I could be better at it in terms of 10 blog ideas within that 5 hours that I was traipsing.
Yep.
If I just do it in 4.5 and take half an hour to write down what came out of it, I'm a lot better off afterwards.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right.
So that's before and during. I mean, should we?
After is
there's
easy.
so much we could talk about more about
There is.
conferences, but yeah, maybe
So the
maybe
goal,
that's a good segue to after.
the goal when you're there is make an impact, build a relationship, make an impact, build a relationship, make an impact, and build a relationship. I can't tell you the number of people that I've become friends with that were speakers at a conference that I just went up and talked to them afterwards, right? And we've become friends. Getting to know people in the tech community that work for vendors, they're not likely to stay, even if you don't like the vendor, if you like the person, make the relationship, make an impact, right? Your ability to leverage that in the future for any number of things, including just having a friend, right? Just having someone that you recognize, having an inside voice, right? When you're in the middle of a negotiation or trying to find something, right? Being able to call someone that works within the vendor space and go, "Hey, Phil, what do you think of so and so? Are they someone that I should spend my money on?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? All of that stuff has tremendous value. And remember, the average person stays at their job for 1.5 to 2.5 years, right? And vendors are very nepotistic; they'll steal from each other. Nepotistic's the wrong word, but incestuous is the right word. They'll
Yep.
steal from each other, right? So that person that you knew at a company that you really weren't interested in buying from, the person's likely to go to somebody else, and maybe you will be interested in buying from them, right? So make an impact and build a relationship. That should be the goal of every single thing you do at a booth or at a conference. Because if you're doing neither of those things, you could have just stayed home and watched it on YouTube.
I've got one final one, which it may be too early to say. I'll say it anyway because I've got the baton now. So the one thing that I think I have got out of conferences that every time it hits me like a whale is that I find I get my thinking changed. So I actively go and look for sessions that I wouldn't have thought of. Areas that, so for example, the whole VR generative AI thing, I went and looked at a few booths of that at the MWC, the telecoms conference, and I thought that's how it works. Now I understand it far better than because you can read about it as much
Sure.
as you like. And at another one, it was more about kind of how people are doing software development now, and it was just deliberately finding sessions that I wouldn't normally go to or stands that I wouldn't normally go to in order to give me aha moments and get me to think differently.
Oh, yeah.
Very powerful tool.
For the first 10 years that I went to DEF CON, you basically have to camp. So if you wanted to see a session, you knew that session was going to be full, you'd go to the session before because they wouldn't clear the room. And that way you'd get a seat in the next session.
Mm-hmm.
And universally, for the first 10 years I went, the session that you wanted to see was worse than the session that you sat into and didn't want to see.
Brilliant.
So after is an easy sum up.
Mm-hmm.
After is make your notes, do your after actions. One of the things I really like from my employees is put together 5 slides. Tell me what you learned. Like, what should the organization be aware of? What should I be aware of? What's coming? Right. If you report to someone in the tech chain, absolutely do that. Put together some slides. Show your leadership what you learned and what the organization should be aware of, because it's hard to get funding for these conferences, and that sort of thing can immediately justify it. If you share with the organization and something that'll impact a decision on a $250 million deal, or sorry, $250,000 deal. I mean, $250 million obviously, but $250,000 deal, you've paid for your conference.
There's a massive irony there, which is kind of that's what the whole conference was for in the first place. It was so you could go and learn something, and that you would bring something back. And so the value of that is enormous. 100% agree. So
I think that's it for this week's.
I think it is.
Good, the bad, and the techie. We hope you've had as good a time as we did, and you weren't bothered by our meandering. If you were, leave us a comment, call us out. Regardless, please subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast distributor. Let us know what you think, and if you'd like to be a guest or have a topic, please reach out to John or myself. LinkedIn's easy. Comments on the podcast are another easy way. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to do a topic that would resonate a little better for you. Anyhow, subscribe, reach out. This has been The Good, the Bad, and the Techie, and I'm Howard Holton.
I'm John Collins.
We'll talk to you next time.